Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports new COVID-19 cases in the 300s for a third straight day. The authorities still want the number to come down, though, before they can ease the rules ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday. Inspired by the activists from Reddit, South Korean investors launched their own battle against short selling, saying the practice has made huge gains for the big players but hurt the country's retail investors. And the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Tourism announces a program of discounts for performances, accommodations, and even fitness programs to help revive the culture sector hit by the pandemic. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has seen new cases of COVID-19 stay in the 300s for a third straight day. Still, the health authorities want to make sure the numbers are down even more before they let up on the distancing rules ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday. The country's plans for rolling out vaccines, in the meantime, are getting clearer. Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea reported 336 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, of which 295 were local transmissions. The number of cases has been falling since a spike above 500 cases last week. However, with new clusters at risk-prone facilities such as hospitals, churches, and nursing homes, as well as cases arising from daily life, the authorities say the country is still under threat. With the Lunar New Year holidays and first day of school coming up soon, the authorities want to make significant improvements beforehand.
The health authorities will reassess the easing of virus prevention measures before the Lunar New Year holidays if it finds the current situation has stabilized after closely watching this week's COVID-19 infections trend and deciding the level of risk of another major outbreak.
Meanwhile, South Korea is quickly gearing up to roll out vaccines, with the rollout starting mid-February. First up will be Pfizer's vaccines from the COVAX facility, with nearly 120,000 doses to arrive in South Korea then. The initial batch of AstraZeneca's 600,000 doses are guaranteed as well before the end of March. First up for inoculations will be frontline medical workers. Next up will be the elderly, who will likely receive AstraZeneca's vaccine. The vaccine has been rolled out in the UK since early January, so by the time the supply is due to be rolled out in Korea, much more data will be available on its effectiveness. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And when South Korea starts distributing and administering COVID-19 vaccines in earnest later this month, they'll be from 5 different companies. Our Choi Min-jung takes a closer look at the effectiveness of each of the vaccines.
The 5 vaccines South Koreans will be receiving against COVID-19 are from Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Janssen, and Novavax. Based on Pfizer's and Moderna's phase 3 clinical trials, their vaccines have the highest efficacy rate, with 95% and 94% respectively. According to data collected from Israel after administering shots to citizens, Pfizer's 2-dose vaccine showed that it's 92% effective against the virus. Next in line is Novavax. The U.S. biotech firm announced last week that its vaccine was 89% effective. Watchers say that the company uses the safest method to produce vaccines, similar to the process used for vaccines against hepatitis B. Results also revealed Novavax vaccines to be almost 86% effective against the UK variant. However, a separate trial offered a much lower efficacy rate against the South African strain, at just below 50%. Coming next is AstraZeneca's vaccine with a 70% efficacy rate, followed by Janssen's at 66%, the lowest of the 5. Janssen's vaccine was also shown to be less effective against the South African variant at 57%. The company is looking into whether the single-dose vaccine could become more effective if given in 2 shots. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
For the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday, President Moon Jae-in has sent gifts to some 15,000 people, including frontline workers fighting the pandemic and the underprivileged. The gift sets contain regional specialties, including traditional Korean liquor and traditional sweets and cookies. In a card enclosed with the gifts, President Moon said he will do his best this year to look after people's livelihoods. The presidential chief of staff and other top Blue House officials will also send gifts of regional agricultural products to laborers working out in the cold this winter. The short squeeze on Wall Street in the past week or so, fueled by social media and targeting most prominently the company GameStop, has inspired small investors in South Korea. The top official has warned, though, of volatility created in the market by what he calls herd behavior. Ji-young has more.
Small retail investors have defied the short sellers on Wall Street by exploding the price of GameStop shares. The price has come down a bit, but their campaign has spread to the South Korean stock market too. Like the now famous forum Wall Street Bets on the social network Reddit, a group of influential retail traders in South Korea have launched K-Street Bets to do battle against short selling, which they call an axis of evil.
Retail investors are suffering massive losses because of short selling. Short sellers are reaping about 39 times the gains of individual investors. If it were a game, they'd have a win rate of 97.5%. We started this movement to reduce the damage to small investors.
To put it simply, short selling is when investors bet a stock is going to go down in price. It's a technique used mostly by big banks and hedge funds. To reduce market volatility in the pandemic, short selling has been banned in South Korea since last March. But there are still some short positions taken before the ban that have been extended. So to prevent a short squeeze like the one on GameStop, when investors try to push short sellers out by bidding up the price, foreigners and institutions have been buying certain companies. The share price of pharmaceutical firm Celltrion, one of the most heavily shorted local stocks, surged by 14.5% on Monday. The bio company HLB saw its price go up by more than 7%. South Korea's first Vice Finance Minister Kim Yong-bum said Tuesday that the GameStop case is a classic example of herd mentality that has raised market volatility.
In a digitalized trading environment, herd behavior like the GameStop case could happen frequently now that all market participants can get information easily. Therefore, we will closely monitor the impact.
The anti-short selling battle has also spread to silver. Silver futures extended a surge of as much as 13% on Monday to $30.35, lifting the prices to an 8-year high. Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's consumer prices rose in January by less than 1% for a fourth consecutive month. According to Statistics Korea, the consumer price index rose 0.8% from the month before and by just 0.6% on year. That's well short of the Bank of Korea's inflation target of 2%. Some food products have soared in price, though, because of an outbreak of bird flu. Farmers have had to destroy millions of birds. The price of chickens and ducks were up 11.5% on year, and eggs were up 15%. South Korea's Culture Ministry is going to provide 83.5 billion won, or almost $75 million worth, of discounts and rebates to revive the culture sector. The ministry says these discounts will be for accommodations, performances, and gyms, and those can also be used for online fitness programs. The ministry also laid out 4 major policy goals for the year, which include reviving the culture ecosystem and continuing to invest in the Korean wave, or Hallyu, around the world, including an increase in the number of Korean language institutes. The ministry projects that the overall content industry will grow by more than $4 billion this year on the back of these initiatives. The city of Seoul is sharing its public transport policies with officials from other countries this week at an online forum hosted by the World Bank. It's called Transforming Transportation 2021, and officials will be discussing ways to make cities more sustainable. Seoul will be sharing what it's done to make the city safe and how it's planning to make the traffic system more efficient. One thing it's done already is to offer inexpensive bicycle rentals that you can pick up and return just about anywhere in the city. And it's also put rules in place to enable the widespread use of electric scooters. The forum runs for 3 days through Friday. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, some of the volatility over the short squeeze on GameStop and other assets has eased on Wall Street. The main indices posting strong gains on Monday and the futures higher right now. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, if you look at the U.S. market, it closed deeply rising quite sharply on Monday. after quite a bit of a correction that we saw on last week. If you look at the Dow Jones, it was up 0.8%. S&P was up 1.6%. NASDAQ was up 2.6%. And the small mid-cap also rose over 2%. Now, if you look at the concern over the market last week, it was all about the GameStop trading frenzies. People were talking about the possible bubbles and also the concern about the vaccine rollouts. All they're saying was that the short selling was too much, that some kind of the correction that needs to be done for the regulations, because for the GameStop, more than 140% of short selling actually occurred. That is higher than the actual amount of shares that were borrowed. So clearly that is creating some kind of volatility, and a lot of people are talking about these issues. But in reality, the strategy of long-short is not a major issue. Short selling a poor company while buying a strong company in terms of the earnings and perspectives, that is nothing wrong with the strategy. It's just that the too much of the greed resulting into overselling was the key issue here. And that if you look at the overall size of the short selling as a percentage of the total market cap of S&P 500, it is one of the lowest amount at the current point in time at 1.6%. So I think that is the liquidity that is driving this kind of volatilities. It could be driving share price upward or downward with all kinds of the derivatives. So for the time being, we think that the liquidity is so large, and the short selling might not be happening that aggressively in the futures, that will result into possible bubble of the overall equity market in the future. So we don't think that this event is going to cause any kind of financial crisis per se, that one of the institutions that were heavily short sellers will not go bankrupt because the size of it is not that big in our calculation. So all in all, we think that the overall market is probably entering in a phase where there will be much bigger bubble in the future.
Right, and Korean stocks higher today too, carrying on from yesterday, though tapering off from the session high. What's pushing shares higher, and where do you see the local market going from here?
Right, I think that this is somewhat to do with the political issues here, because as you know, that short selling is banned for Korean equity market for the time being. That the extension was actually happened up until the March 15th. Now there's a possibility that that ban will continue to remain in Korea for another 3 to 6 months. People are saying that short selling is kind of skewed towards the favoring institutions or large institutions rather than the individuals. I think the strategy of short selling is not a problem. Just question mark is that whether the regulatory framework is justified for both sides of retail investors as well as institutional investors. We think that there will be some system changes that will happen. The long-short strategy will probably come to a picture further in the future, and we need that kind of regulatory environment because foreign investors will not invest into Korea unless the system is well deregulated. If more regulation continues to happen, then that is actually negative for the risk premium for Korea and equity market. So hopefully we'll see some kind of changes happen, that the institutions and individuals are playing in the same field, that this will result into further rise of the Korean equity market in the future. So far, we are seeing markets actually recovering quite nicely. Yesterday, it rose more than 2.7%. Today, it's up another 1.3%. We think that this is all resulting in because of the very strong fundamentals, and the earnings growth are actually coming in for Korea right now.
Mr. Yu, we've got a little bit of time left. Could you tell us about consumer prices in Korea, which last month came in up only 0.6% from a year before?
Yes, the inflation is coming in. Consumer price was up 0.6%. it is actually better than 0.3% expectations. We think that this kind of trend could continue as long as Korean economy is recovering in the future with the better export prices and export numbers. Hopefully, the inflation pressure is not too large so that the Bank of Korea will not touch any kind of liquidity conditions. But all in all, recovering of the inflation is in the right direction, and we think that that is indicating that the Korean economy is recovering nicely.
Got it. All right, Mr. Youth, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today, as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.